Today, I'm going to talk to you about vocal compression, why to use it, how to use it, and also talk about some of the bad information that I believe is out there that's holding you back from getting that radio ready vocal that you've been aiming to get. Now, I've been producing my own vocals for over 25 years. I also worked with a Dove winning and Grammy nominated music producer doing vocal production. So these are some of the things that I picked up over the years, the good and the bad, to help dispel the myth of compression and all the voodoo, the secret sauce, the vibe, all those words that you hear about compression. I'm going to break it down for you in this video so you can walk away being confident on how to use it and also when to not use it. Now, this video is kind of breaking more into the mix phase, but honestly, I feel like there's a lot of talk around mixing, but there's not a lot of talk around editing. And I feel like editing is really that secret sauce that you're missing in your productions. If you want to learn more about why your vocals really aren't translating, then go in the link in the description below and download this free resource I have for you. It'll help open up your eyes to what you should be doing pre-mix to make sure that your vocals are connecting with your audience. So go check that out. Now, before I jump into an audio demo of vocals and compressing vocals, I wanted to talk about the basic concepts of a compressor so you understand how to hear it, how to use it for vibe, rather than just thinking about controls and presets, because that's the wrong way to go about compression. There are some videos out there that'll talk about the settings and be like, just use these settings and you'll be good to go. That's an oversimplification of how to use a compressor, especially because all audio sources are different. You can't just use presets. It's not a good way to go. Also, you might hear about different compressors being better for different things. And this comes into play with all the vintage plugins or vintage hardware that you hear about, the LA2As, 1176s, the Fairchilds, DBX 160s. Those do add a specific character to a sound source. But again, if you're just thinking about, oh, it adds vibe, you don't know what that actually means if you don't understand what's happening with the compressor and what it's doing to your voice. So I would encourage you to kind of put all that out of your head and just think about what a compressor actually does. So at its most basic, a compressor is an automated volume control. It's going to help reduce the dynamics of the sound source. Vocals are very dynamic, so it can go from loud to quiet and a lot of different micro adjustments throughout the performance. So the compressor is going to help that sit better in the stereo field. Now imagine this right here is your stereo field. You have a speaker here, and in between here you have your left to right, you have your forward and back, and then you have your top to bottom. Forward and back is going to be your volume. So the louder something is, the more that's going to come forward. As you can see, the more my fist comes forward here, the more space it takes up. If I bring my fist back, as you see, it goes further back into the speakers. It's smaller and takes up less space. Now, if you have a dynamic vocal, you're going to be having a lot of this kind of movement, which can sound unprofessional. It sounds unruly, and it's not that easy to listen to. So the compressor will help to control that front to back movement. However, you don't want to just crush a vocal and keep it right in one spot, because then you will kill the natural vibe, the movement, and the emotion of the vocal. Now, there are times you're going to want to crush that vocal, especially in very dense mixes. But if you are a singer-songwriter and say you have a sparse arrangement, you do want to keep some of that back and forth movement in your vocal to make it sound natural and musical. Now, calling it just an automated volume control is, again, an oversimplification. Now we need to talk about compressors as a tone box. Now, what does that mean? Often people just associate that with it adding analog harmonics and all these types of things that an old unit would put into the signal through circuitry. And that can add some saturation, which does sound pleasing to the ear. And again, it's kind of vague and hard to understand if you don't really know what vibe means or what saturation in certain areas of the frequency range does to a sound. So we have to think about EQ, compressing will also affect the EQ curves of your sound source. The vocal has a pretty full frequency response. You have the chest, you have your face nasal area, you have the consonants, it's tss, tss, and some voices have more air than others. So you kind of have the whole frequency range. And the EQ spectrum is not treated equally when it comes to dynamics and the way you hear it. Lower mid-range sits back in that stereo field. So it's harder to push it forward and come out of the speakers, meaning you're not going to hear it as audibly as, say, the consonants is, because that tends to sit further up in the mix. It has more transient response, so it's going to cut through more. That is something that a compressor is going to help reduce, but also the compressor can bring up quiet parts like the lower mid-range, so that could push it forward to help create a more balanced frequency response in your vocal. Now, if you don't know how to control that, you may do more harm than good. So let's again go back to our stereo field. Let's say that this is your vocal. This would be a very linear vocal, but that's not how it works. Let's say when you record it, your lower mid-range is falling back and your consonants are up here and they're poking forward. So you have your stereo field, and this is kind of how your vocal's sitting. A compressor can help flatten that out and keep it more dynamic and more balanced EQ-wise. But how do you accomplish that? And that is what we're going to talk about when we get into the session. We're going to walk through how to use the controls to either bring forward information within the voice that's pleasing, that brings out the notes, could bring out some chest and some, beautiful harmonics, and then how to reduce things like consonances or bring consonances out to make it sound more aggressive. This is what a compressor can do. And when you understand how to shape the vocal with the compressor, it all makes so much more sense, because you're learning how not to only control the volume dynamics of just the overall level, but also the volume dynamics of the EQ range of the source itself. And that's how you're going to learn how to bring out the best in your vocal and get something that sounds radio ready. So enough of me waffling on about this concept. I really just want you to understand what we're listening for and what a compressor is actually doing. To recap before we jump in, it's an automated volume control. It's a tone box because it can add in some saturation if you're using some analog style compression, which affects the frequency range. But even deeper, you're affecting the volume itself in the frequency range. It's almost like mini faders within the frequency. Again, controlling the front to back of not just volume, but also where it sits in the frequency range. Let's dive into this. So here's just a simple singer-songwriter session that I'm doing. I have my main vocal track here, and then I have a piano track here. The piano track replaces the actual instrumentation of the track, so that way it's more controlled and contained. This is a MIDI track. I want you to be able to hear the dynamic changes in the voice and not be too distracted by the other elements within the track itself. As you can see here with the vocal, it has a bit of dynamics. You can see that it gets louder, quieter, louder, soft. There's right here, it looks like a transient because it's really sharp, and then it drops off again. And this is what a compressor is trying to control. All this will create, again, that front to back movement within the speakers, and that can make a vocal sound more amateur, less polished, less controlled, and that can interfere with your vocal connecting with your audience. So let's listen to the vocal itself, and I'm going to show you that feeling of pushing the volume up and how it comes forward to you and takes up more space, and when I pull it back, how it shrinks and takes up less space. Check it out. Gardens enclosed, but outside the skates I'll wait for you. Gardens enclosed, but outside the skates I'll wait for you. Gardens enclosed, but outside the skates I'll wait for you. Gardens enclosed, but outside the skates I'll wait for you. Gardens in. So obviously, louder, you're gonna hear it more. Quieter, you're gonna hear it less. But if you listen again to the dynamics, you'll hear it continue to pop out, fall back, pop out, no matter how loud or how quiet it is. And that, again, is the dynamics happening not just volume-wise, but also with the tone of the voice. Gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for you. And in this performance itself, it was done with a Shure SM7B. I feel like it's really bringing out more of the consonants of my voice, as well as that upper mid-range and some air. It kind of, to me, feels like it doesn't have a whole lot of body, or that lower mid-range, which we may be able to fix with using a compressor. Now, I'm using the distressor because one thing about the distressor is that it doesn't have your typical controls. It does have your ratio, but it doesn't have a threshold or a knee control, which we are not going to discuss in this video, because you can watch a bunch of other videos that discuss what those things do or what they mean. But again, I'm not trying to teach you the technical. I'm trying to teach you how to understand compression to bring out your vibe. Now, the distressor does have a threshold and a knee control, and it's all based on this input control. But again, I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to show you what to listen for. The main controls that we're going to be using to affect not just the dynamic control of the vocal, but also the tone of it, is the attack and the release. The attack is going to be when the compressor reacts and compresses the vocal, reduces that dynamic range. And this attack, because it's a vocal, is going to respond a lot more to the consonances, the sit, 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 the high transient parts of the voice, to help bring that back a little bit. And when you bring that back, it will inevitably bring up some of the other less transient information in your voice that's harmonically pleasing, like the mid-range. And the release is going to be how fast the compressor goes back to not compressing anything at all. All the other controls here on the distressor we're not even going to worry about. The distressor itself is actually pretty clean at normal compression levels, and if you're not using the detector circuits or the saturation circuit. All right, so I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to keep this at 4:1 ratio, and then I'm just going to play with the input and the output until I'm getting like 3, 5, 6 dB of gain reduction. Let's check it out. Gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, All right, so that right there is pretty good. You want to make sure that you are level matching, because sometimes compressors can make things sound louder, and louder always sounds better to our ears. So just make sure that the volume feels the same. All right, so I'm going to put the attack really slow, and then I'm going to put the release really fast. We probably aren't going to see much compression this way, because the compressor is not reacting fast enough to the signal, and the release is releasing so fast that it's just not going to do a whole lot. Let's check it out. Gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed. No compression. So now what I'm going to do is speed up the attack until we start seeing compression again. And I want you to listen to the consonances of my voice, these louder parts as well, and hear how it starts to control that and bring it back into the stereo field. Gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your. Okay, and as I do that, it is affecting the upper EQ range of my voice, and it almost feels like the lower mid-range is coming forward because the attack is hitting those peaks. Listen again. Gardens enclosed, but outside the gates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside
outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your.
So again, this is now taking the volume of that like 3K, 5K range and bringing it back, while that's also then pushing forward the lower mid range, because it's not really compressing that part of it. It's compressing my attack, those tss, tss, the sharp transients. Now, a very fast release for a vocal like this is not ideal, because what's going to happen is it's going to make this compressor kind of kick in, kick out, kick in, kick out, kick in, kick out. And that can create some unwanted distortion and just, again, unevenness in the vocal. Just like if I had the attack too slow and it's not catching all those peaks, with the release too fast, you'll hear the compressor, and sometimes it can create distortion as well in the compression, because it's constantly, kicking off, kicking on, kicking off, kicking on. So while the attack is kind of your initial control for things popping out of the speakers, your release is going to be how you can create consistency in the tone of your voice. Check this out. When I start to make the release slower, you'll start to feel more consistency in the tonal part of my voice. So check this out.
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your garden.
And without it,
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates.
But now what I'm hearing is that the lower mid-range of my voice is now poking out more than my consonants is, which now almost did the reverse effect of where we started. Before, I felt like there was too much of the consonants and the upper frequency range of my voice popping out, and now I feel like we reversed it. So this is where we want to release the attack and make it a little slower so we can bring those consonants back out. Check it out.
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait.
All right. So again, without the compression, it feels less balanced in the EQ frequency range, as well as not balanced in the front to back of my performance, which makes it sound amateur.
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your.
And with it on again.
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed.
All right, and so you can just play around with attack and release and see how it shapes, how it builds tone into your voice. And again, it's not adding tone, it's just revealing the tone that's already there and shaping it in a way that is pleasing to the ear, which is why it's important that you have a good vocal performance to begin with. But let's see what happens if I just make the release super slow and the attack really fast.
Gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait for your gardens enclosed, but outside of skates, I'll wait.
As you can hear, it all of a sudden feels muddy, feels closed off, claustrophobic. There's no openness to it because you've absolutely annihilated any of the initial transient response, and you're keeping the quieter parts of the voice that tend to want to sit back in the speakers. You're kind of clamping that and making that the focal point of the tone of the voice, which now doesn't feel right. So we really want to be looking at the attack and the release controls when shaping the tone, controlling the dynamics of your voice. The attack is going to help with the transients, the T's, the things that make your voice articulate. You don't want to totally squash those and remove them. And you also don't want them poking out too much, because that's what's going to make your voice pop in and out of the speakers the most. The release If you have it too fast, the compressor is going to turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off, and it can make your vocal, again, feel inconsistent, and it can introduce unwanted distortion into your vocal. So you're going to want to play with the release to bring out the body, the tone of your voice, so it sits more forward in the mix and then blends in with the articulation, the air of your voice to make it feel more consistent, not just volume wise, but in the frequency range. So your voice is not only audible, cuts through the mix, but you're able to feel the tone, which is going to be what your listener is going to connect to. All right, so let me know in the comments below, what was your big light bulb moment when it came to compression, especially when it comes to vocals? And again, this is one piece of the puzzle when it comes to vocal production and making your vocals sound professional. And I consider this more of like a sweetening effect. If you don't have a good sounding vocal to begin with, then compressions can do some work, but it's not going to do much. So that's why I highly recommend learning how to edit your vocals. And editing starts from the performance. How do you perform well? Then how do you edit that vocal to make the raw vocal sound awesome already? That way, when you get to compression, you're only bringing out the best and not trying to fix the worst. So then that is something that you want to learn. Go again into the description below, click that link, and you'll find out the reasons why your vocal is not sounding professional, and demystify that process, and you'll be good to go. Hope you have a good day. See you in the next one.